Good morning, everyone. Today is January 19th, 2023, and welcome. This is the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project, founded by Natalie Armstrong-Motin in the spring of 2020. Every week, Jean Lawler and I are delighted to host another cutting-edge webinar for mediators, arbitrators, lawyers, and anybody who negotiates. As you know, there's no charge for these great webinars. Rather, we ask you to contribute to a food bank if you like what you see. And our audiences have been unbelievably generous, contributing to fight food insecurity around the world, contributions in honor of our great speakers. Every week, one of my favorite parts of the program is when we announce the running total of how much our audiences have contributed to date. Jean Lawler, would you please do the honors?
The drum roll, please. Wow. Well, this is pretty amazing, you guys. I mean, we're going to be at 400,000 before we know it. But right now, today, excuse me, we're at $354,835.85. And these are only amounts that people have told us about. So it would be so wonderful if you're making donations, even if you've been making them in the past and haven't told us. Go ahead and send Natalie, Jeff, or myself a chat message or an email, and we'll be happy to add it to the total and moving forward. And just one comment real quickly. There was an amazing speech by Mrs. Zelenska this week, and a quote from her is, "Starvation is not acceptable," as she was talking about hunger in the world. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you so much for your generosity. This is just amazing. Thank you. Jeff?
Thank you, Jean. Today, we are really honored and delighted to have Peter Robinson as our guest speaker. This is Peter's second appearance on the New Possibilities Hour. We're so happy to have him back. His first appearance was unbelievably popular. We post recordings of many of these, and Peter's is the most watched recording, indeed the only one that has received over 1,000 views. It was spectacular then, and we know that this encore will be spectacular as well. Peter is Professor Emeritus at the Straus Institute for Dispute Resolution at Pepperdine Caruso School of Law. The Straus Institute was ranked by US News as the #1 ADR program in the country. For the 11 years, Peter Robinson served as its managing director, 2005 to 2016, now known commonly as the Robinson era in ADR. Peter has won just about every award that one can win for teaching and scholarship and leadership in the field of ADR. The professional accomplishment of which he is most proud is creating a class and book titled Apology, Forgiveness, and Reconciliation for Good Lawyers and Other Peacemakers. Today, Peter is going to tackle the provocative topic, a mediator's tension between neutrality and fairness. Peter, we can't wait to hear what you have to offer. You're a dear friend. We're so happy you're here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff. And again, I just want you to know I appreciate our friendship very much, Jeff. In fact, I look back years ago when you had the connections and the vision for that Fab Four picture that you created. But first, I want to salute, Natalie and Jeff and Jean, because to have this vision of saying, let's offer free education and ask people to voluntarily donate to a cause that all of us can recognize as, there are folks who don't have food, and what a great vision, and to know that it has been so successful. I just want us all to take a moment and thank you for your leadership and your vision and your just execution week by week. I can only imagine the pressure. So I also want to make sure that we manage everyone's expectations. When they said that the last time I did a presentation, it went really well, I want you to know, last time I talked about apology and forgiveness, I want you to know, this time it's not, the presentation is not going to be near as good. So let's all start with a lower bar here, see if I can stumble through this. Fair enough? but it is a topic that I love to talk about, and frankly, I find really, really interesting and really important. So let's go ahead to take a look at this, and we'll start. Let me make sure I got I'm up here in the right way here. We'll start by looking at neutrality. Do we understand that when we step into the mediator's chair, that there's an expectation that we'll be neutral? Give me a raise of the hand if you say, yeah, that's part of the concept, the oath. Okay, so many of us have raised our hands. Yeah, I'm going to be neutral. In fact, you know, often they call the field of mediators and arbitrators neutrals. Well, you know, we're neutrals. Okay, so I see lots of people having their hands raised, thumbs up. Thank you. Great, perfect. Now my question is, what does that mean? And I want to ask us to if you will, dumb it down, to use very simple language, to say, when I have at least in my own mind, you know, I say, okay, Peter, you know, be neutral. You know, what am I trying to do here? How would you define neutrality? And again, I'm used to interactive. So if anyone wants to, David, is that hand raised because you want to you want to jump in? Does anybody want to suggest? I will give you a simple definition if you want, but I'll let you guys be a part of it if you want. I don't know if it's technology
Peter,
or what, but I'm going to jump in here.
Peter,
Right.
I would say neutrality, at least part of it, is that the mediator comes in without a predisposed idea of who's right and who's wrong, and without a predisposed idea of how the mediation should come out, whether it should settle, and if it should settle on what terms.
Okay. Good. So the predisposition was the main thing I heard from that we come in with a blank page and with an open mind and frankly with a broad spectrum of possible outcomes. You know, as we think about about being neutral, let me ask if you'll play along with me, if you will accept a more simple definition than Jeff. Jeff's a very smart guy, and he always has, you know, he's very articulate. But let me bring it down to the most basic levels. Not take sides. Is that okay for a working? Are we okay with that? Thumbs up. Okay. All right. Not take sides. Okay. Okay, so now we have this one virtue as mediators that we're going to be neutral. Fair enough. Now my next question is, how many of us as mediators believe that fairness is also on the list of virtues? Give me a show of hands where somebody say, yeah, I feel some responsibility for fairness. Okay, I'm not getting as many hands as I had for neutrality.
So, Peter, you've asked an ambiguous question.
Of course I have.
Of course you have. You're a professor. So there are some people may be thinking fairness of the process, and some people may be thinking fairness of the outcome. And those are two different things.
So Jeff, being a well-read, thoughtful guy, has helped us thin slice this and says, okay, hold on. Are we talking about outcome fairness? Or are we talking about process fairness? So let me ask the question again. How many of you think that as a mediator, you have some concern, some awareness, some responsibility with regard to outcome fairness? Okay, couple hands, but not many. How many people say, okay, I'm not gonna take the bait on that one, but I'll take the bait on process fairness. Okay, boy, I see a lot of hands on process fairness. Excellent. Okay, good. So first of all, before we do anything, I want you to know that there are people who say that that we should have no responsibility for any fairness. John Haynes was past president of the Academy of Family Mediators before it merged into other organizations. The Academy of Family Mediators was the organization that largely divorce mediators that was most concerned about ethics and most concerned about, what is our role and how do we do it right? And here is a past president of that organization. He was a professor up in Canada. He died maybe 10 years ago. John Haynes, if you want to look at his work. But the fact is that he would go to conferences and say, folks, stop it. Any concern for any fairness is a fool's errand because it runs into conflict with neutrality. Anytime we do anything, even in the interest of process fairness, we are favoring someone. The question that we ask, the topic that we bring up, we are favoring someone and we are disfavoring someone. So therefore, he says, erase all fairness from your mind. And he advocates a very laissez-faire approach to mediation that says that, this is an environment where people are responsible to take care of themselves. I cannot look over their shoulders and even some of us say, well, I can't do that with regard to the outcome, but I do feel some responsibility for process fairness. And we stand back and try and make this differentiation, and that helps us some. And by the way, the canon of ethics largely say that the outcome fairness is not our job. Excuse me, it's canon of ethics. What am I talking about? The model standards of practice for mediators. So notice it's just a model, and different jurisdictions may refine it in different ways, but many statements of ethics, let us off the hook as mediators to say we cannot, take responsibility for outcome fairness, but we do have a responsibility for process fairness. Okay, so now my question is, what are your standards for process fairness? So first of all, let me before I start to drill down on process fairness, let me ask this question. If one means that you're a disciple of John Haynes and that you are an absolute laissez-faire mediator, and you stand back and say, you know what? You guys are responsible to protect yourself. I cannot, take care of you in this process. That's not my job. I refuse to allow that to be a part of my job description, right? So there's John Haynes. I'm going to go a scale of 1 to 10 here. 10 says, you know what? It is absolutely my job to make sure that the process is fair, and we have to figure out what that means eventually. But I right now, I just want everyone to know that I am a very strong advocate for process fairness. And by the way, just to make sure you understand the ramifications of what we're getting into here, is that the question is, do we have a quality control function? Is that part of our job as mediators? And you can frame it in the context of saying, well, yes, for the fair process, I'll take responsibility for that, but certainly not on the outcome. And so scale of 1 to 10, I just want to see how many of us are activists and how many of us are laissez-faire. 10 is an activist, 1 is laissez-faire. You can pick a number in between if you want. So please put up a number of fingers in your hands as to, before I do, let me make sure you understand what I'm doing here. Some of you may be retired judges, and some of you may aspire to be a judge. If any person who gets appointed to the bench has to figure out his judicial philosophy, right? I've had this talk in rooms with 40 judges, and it's fascinating to hear a group of sitting judges talk about this, because there are judges who say that, you know what, if I am overseeing a trial and I think the lawyer is not asking the right question, and that the lawyer appears to me to be incompetent, if it happens in my courtroom, I'm going to ask the question. And that I will, from the bench, ask the witness the question, because when I took the bench, I had in mind that I wanted to see justice happen in my courtroom. And if I think for some reason or not it's going off the rails, I will use the bench to intervene and try and make sure that what happens here is just. And if the right question is not being asked, I'll ask it. And other judges in the room saying, you can't do that. If you do that, you're compromising the neutrality of the bench. And to watch 2 judges, both of them, and they both have their domain in their courtroom, but yet they run their courtroom very differently because of their judicial philosophy. And some of them are activist judges saying, you know what, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure the justice comes out of my courtroom, right? And others I'm going to say, time out here. There's bigger issues here about how the judiciary is perceived and whether we're perceived as biased or neutral, and all. And so I'm asking for you. What's your judicial philosophy or your mediator philosophy between saying, I'll be an activist, I'll ask the question that's obvious to me because of my background and experience, but evidently other people in the room, didn't even think of this question. Or do I just sit back and let the parties ask the questions that are important to them, and I shouldn't stick my nose into their business. So let me ask, scale of 1 to 10. How many of you say, okay, Peter, I think I'm more of a laissez-faire, or no, I think I'm more of an activist interventionist mediator. I'm looking for a show of hands now, fingers.
So Peter, is this with respect to process or outcome?
We'll say process. But okay, I see a 6, I see an 8, I see an 8, I see a 5, I see a 3, I see another 8, 7, 10. Hold on, we have more than one page here. Let me see. I see a 5, I see a 4, 5. Okay. So I want you to know, I hope that you are intrigued that we have a spectrum among this community of participants between 3 and 10. And some of you, as we're starting to explore this, you're saying, I'm more towards that neutral side. I think that John Haynes guy is pretty smart. And some of you are saying, I don't know. I mean, I still feel, at least for process, as Jeff has helped us, specify, at least regard to process, I feel some responsibility to make sure that, that I'm responsible to deliver a fair process. Well, I want to put some meat on the bones now. And I want to drill down and test what test your view of yourself by looking at defining fair process. And I'm going to do it in a context that it might be foreign to most of you. Okay, I'm going to ask you to go with me to a family mediation, and put it in that environment. All right. Now I know most of you don't do that, but as it develops, I'm going to tie it back to commercial practice. So if you're a commercial mediator, don't tune out, because this is going to fall right into your lap. Again, if in a minute, I'll circle it back. But for right now, I want you to assume that that you're mediating a divorce, and don't you know that that you may not be a certified family law specialist, but you do know that in your jurisdiction they have something akin to what we in California we call community property. And you know that community property is supposed to be split 50-50 according to the law, if the law is our measure for fairness. All right, so 50-50 split. And community property when you see it, and this family, they got married young and had nothing. They didn't inherit anything. Frankly, everything they have is community property. And say, okay, fine. So you're mediating away, and you get to one of the big assets. You say, hey, you know what? Have you guys thought about what you want to do about the and I'm gonna be stereotypic here. I'm going to assume that they have one wage earner, and the other person was a stay-at-home parent. And I'll even be sexist here. If you allow me to stereotype, I'm going to say the man was the wage earner and the woman was a stay-at-home parent. Okay. And don't you know that you get to the fact of the man's retirement benefits, right? And say, okay, have you guys thought about what you're going to do about this significant community asset? And don't you know that, oh my gosh, the husband throws a temper tantrum. He says, are you crazy? I hated my job. I'm the one that went to that. It was hell. And I went to it. I did it to provide for my family. And those are my retirement. Are you suggesting that she should get half of my retirement benefit? And he just carries on and has a big fit, right? Now, some of you might think, you know what? I might step into the space here and educate him about community property in our state, and that retirement benefits are part of what was acquired during the course of the marriage, and that those do need to be. I might step into that space and educate him, but before you do, she rescues you. She says, he can have it. I say, I'm sorry, what did you say? He can have his retirement benefits. I don't want them. So. Well, wow. Okay. Well, how about that? So you move the retirement benefits over under his column. In the back of your mind, you're thinking, you know what? The other significant asset is the equity in the family home, and she's going to trade the home for the retirement benefits. I think it'll all work out in the wash, maybe, right? So you mediate some other issues. Eventually you get to the question of, okay, well, have you guys talked about, the equity in the family home? And don't you know, you're expecting her to step up and say, yeah, well, okay, that's what I want. But she doesn't. And don't you know, he throws another temper tantrum. He says, what? Are you kidding? It was my salary that made those monthly payments. She's the one that wants this divorce. She's the one that's leaving. I should be able to keep the home and the kid. And he has an impassioned temper tantrum, right? And you're again about to think, okay, I need to step into the space here and do some education and let him know that the family home is considered an equity that would be usually considered a community property unless there's some unusual circumstances that you don't know about, and that would be split 50-50. But before you get into that space, don't you know that she rescues you again? She says, he can have it. So what did you say? He can have the family home. I don't want it. Wow. Okay. So you move that over in his column. When they get done with their negotiations, in your objective opinion, they don't have anything near a 50-50 split. They have a 90-10 split. So now, notice with me, I'm going to summarize everything, right? Is my act of summarization to make sure that we have clarity as far as what the deal is that affecting neutrality? When I say, I just want to make sure that, that we all kind of look at this from the big picture, because we made a lot of individual decisions. If you want to see the aggregate picture, what we have here is that the husband's taking the family home, the husband's taking the retirement benefits, the wife is getting the photo albums and the dog, and you're each taking your car and your clothing. Is that what you guys are, what you both want to do? I propose to you even summarizing that and putting a magnifying glass on this inequity is potentially viewed as compromising my neutrality. But the fact is, you're just summarizing, and they both say yes. Yeah, that's what we want to do. So now my question to you is, how many of you say, okay, great, let's write it up. I don't need to ask any questions. I have two consenting adults here. They both I've summarized it, and they said, yep, that's what we want to do. How many people say, let's write it up and let's move it along quickly? Okay, I got a few hands.
Peter, let me ask you a question.
Well, no, wait, not yet.
Okay.
I'll complicate it in a minute.
I'll complicate it even more.
So by the way, what am I looking for right now? I'm looking for all those people who gave me a number of 3 or lower and said that I am a laissez-faire mediator. You know what? This is not my job. And when I see something that is very different than the law, I shrug my shoulders and say, well, wasn't that interesting? But I have two consenting adults. Let's move on. That is putting flesh on the bones to the laissez-faire, okay? Now, the question that I'm sure that Jeff wants to go to, that I want to pose, is that how many of you who were thinking, okay, so we're thinking that, you know what, okay, we have two consenting adults, let's let it go. How many of you want to ask a question of saying, have you both gotten independent legal advice? Have you both consulted with a lawyer before we started these negotiations? I'm going to say, yeah, I would want to ask that question. If I was in that situation and I see this really lopsided outcome, now let me ask, why do we want to ask that question? What is it we're trying to accomplish when we ask that question? We're checking for something. What are we checking for?
We're checking to make sure they know their legal rights and what the outcome could be.
Okay. And informed
Power
decision.
imbalance.
Right. And is this a decision in ignorance, or are they aware of their legal? Is the law a statement of social values, kind of a benchmark that we hopefully will do better than that, but we certainly don't want to come out worse than that. At least people can waive their legal rights all the time, right? But the fact is, it doesn't need to be a knowing waiver. We know that in criminal law, a defendant can plead guilty, right? But it's very interesting because when he or she wants to plead guilty, the judge goes on the record and says, okay, Mr. Defendant, you understand, you have the right to a jury trial. You have the right to a lawyer. If you can't afford one will be able, and it goes through this whole litany of questions on the record. And the defendant says, yes, I know, Your Honor. Yes, I know. And yeah, and you are knowingly waiving these rights, correct? And notice that the judge in a criminal matter, he asks those questions because why? Because if he doesn't, and this person goes to jail, and after a few months, he goes, jail is not as much fun as I thought it would be. I think I do want my trial. If he wants to come back to court and says, hey, can I withdraw that guilty plea? And can we have a trial that the judge, the appellate courts tell the trial judge, if you don't have it on the record that he made a waiver, then he should be able to have his trial. So in the same vein, if we see someone who is apparently waiving their legal right, is it the mediator's job to ask, have you talked to a lawyer? By the way, if she says, no, I haven't talked to a lawyer. My husband went to a lawyer and then he told me what the lawyer said. Do people in your community get divorced like that? I'll let you know my parents got divorced like that. My mom never went to a lawyer. My dad went to a lawyer, told my mom what the lawyer said. My mom says, I'm not going to go to a lawyer. So the fact is that for whatever reason, some people are gun shy of lawyers and they don't go. And now if you know that she is sitting there and she hasn't talked to a lawyer, now let me ask, how do you feel about neutrality or fairness? Should the mediator again, I think informed decision is under a process, it's not the outcome, but the fact is, should a mediator use their office to slow this boat down and say, okay, time out here, let me suggest a cooling off period. In California, we have a state law that says, if a door-to-door salesman comes to your door and sells you something, you have 3 days to rescind. And say, you know what, I don't know what I was thinking, but that guy was smooth and he talked me into it. And I woke up the next morning, I don't want this. So now we have these people who have this understanding, and for the mediator to stand back and say, have you talked to a lawyer? And she says, no, I haven't. Right? How many of you think that it violates the mediator's does it violate the mediator's neutrality to suggest a 3-day cooling off? So, folks, we're making great progress, but let's just sleep on this for a week and make sure everyone's okay with this. In fact, you know what? This week, I'm going to say it neutrally, but I'm really not neutral. I'm going to say, I want both of you to go have this tentative agreement reviewed by a lawyer and make sure that you have legal advice about this agreement before we finalize it, right? Now, notice with me, if you take this moment in the mediation and say that, what would I expect the husband to say? Can we have a caucus? Sure. We step out in the hallway and he says, what? What's up, Jack? You're killing me. She's ready to sign now. I got a great deal on the table. Let's pull the trigger and put this thing to bed, right? And now I better have figured out my mediator philosophy, and I better be able to come back to him and say, you remember when I said that I work for durable agreements, and I don't want to be the mediator that puts together a deal to where people wake up the next morning and say, oh my gosh, what did I do? I got to get out of this. So the fact is, when I said durable agreements, I meant that people would have time to think and digest, and if they haven't talked to a lawyer, to talk to a lawyer. And so now I know many of you mediate in situations to where you have lawyers in the room. So you're saying, well, Peter, this doesn't really apply to me. Oh, have you ever felt like you're in the room with a lawyer who doesn't know as much about this subject matter as you do? And now you're saying, oh my gosh, I've got incompetent counsel. And now all of this drama that I'm talking to you, I put in the context of the person who's not represented. If you've got incompetent counsel, I think you have a very similar dynamic of saying, oh golly, what should I do here? And the laissez-faire says, you know what? I'm not his lawyer. That's his problem. I just hope the lawyer has good malpractice insurance, and we're all. So the fact is that you can easily find a path here that says it's not my job. Some of you might say, you know what, I might want to do something to maybe take the lawyer outside and say, hey, have you thought about such and such? And here you are affecting affecting what's going to cut the outcome of you're affecting the outcome because of your commitment that people be aware of making informed decisions. But it's a big decision for a mediator to say, what do I do when I see someone who, from what I can see, is not making an informed decision? Fair enough. Okay, but wait a minute. What if she says, okay, yeah, I saw a lawyer. How many of you as mediators say, okay, Robinson, shut up. Let's get the agreement, put together, let them sign it. Let's move it on, right? But how many of you are going to say, well, just let me check this a little bit. I mean, did you like see a real lawyer? Did you go to a law office and they had like stuff like diplomas on the wall and stuff? Because I don't know, for those of you in LA, you know that there's a coffee shop down on 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica called The Legal Grind. And they have people who are licensed lawyers in California behind the barista bar, and you can buy a cup of Java and legal advice for $7. And there are people who go down there and say, hey, I got a beef with my landlord, or I'm getting divorced, and they talk to a person who's a real lawyer. They're certainly not a certified family law specialist. And so do you want to, it goes, oh yeah, sure. No, Peter, I talked to a real lawyer. Okay. You might even say, okay, so who'd you see? Oh, I saw Jeff Ketchum. Oh, gee, Jeff Ketchum, a great reputation. Yeah, okay, you did see once he's seen a legit lawyer. Now how many say, okay, Peter, now I've satisfied my concern that this be an informed decision. Sorry. How many of you are going to leave it there? How many of you are going to go to the next level and say, well, geez, did Jeff talk to you about community property? She goes, yeah. And about a 50-50 split of community assets? Yeah. And do you think that's what we're doing in this agreement? She goes, no, I gave away the store. How many of you are going to ask all those questions to confirm that she knows that she's giving away the store? She's walking away from her legal rights. Or how many of you are just going to say she talked to Jeff? If she talked to Jeff, I'm done. Okay. It's a matter of personal choice. But if she says that, no, I'm walking away from the store, how many of you say, okay, Peter, I've assuaged my conscience. She's making an informed decision. She knows she has legal rights. She's choosing not to exercise them. That's what mediation is all about. Flexibility and creativity. She should be allowed to do what she wants to do. Beautiful. I love. I can't say enough about the creativity of mediation. It's a beautiful thing. So let's move it on. Okay. Except for, does anyone have another question that maybe you might want to ask? Like something really, really, really esoteric, like, why? Why are you walking away from your legal rights? How many of us are willing to wade into that black hole of God knows what we're going to find out? And it's scary. Oh my God, who knows where this is? Because what if you ask that question and she says, okay, Pete, here's the deal. My husband's getting frustrated. When he has outbursts like he had over the house and the retirement benefits, I can read him and I can see him tensing up. And frankly, in our 13-year marriage, that's happened 5 or 6 times. And every time after he gets that frustrated, usually within 24 hours, I get the shit beat out of me. So you know what? He can take the money. I just don't want to get beat up again. Wow. Okay. If she tells you that, how many of you say, well, okay, you know what? She's a consenting adult. Let's write it up. It's or how many of you now might have another question about a fair process and ask whether this is so informed consent, informed decisions. One, to ask, is this a free and willing agreement? Or is someone under some form of coercion or duress? And if she's under, by the way, this is actually in the domestic violence environment, it's actually a really complicated question because she might need to get to a place of safety before she can. So I don't want to say it's a simple thing, but the fact is, in this situation, we know that okay, we got some folks here who are moving forward with an agreement, and this agreement is being formed under coercion, and I still think we're under fair process. But we've been willing to dig deep enough to find out that someone's got their arm tied behind their back for one reason or another, and this is far from a free and willing agreement. Is it the mediator's job to call for a timeout, or to end the termination and say, you know, I for a variety of reasons, I don't think that you folks should be doing this through mediation. I think it'd be better if you had lawyers and let your lawyers hash things out between the two of them. That would be more appropriate in my professional judgment. So notice with me, as mediators, are we going to have that as part of what we define as a fair process? Okay, wait, hold on. What if you ask, why are you walking away from everything? What if she doesn't say she's getting beat up? She says, Peter, you don't understand. I said, boy, I'm sure trying. And she says, all right, I'm going to tell you. All right, here's the deal, right? I'm the one that had the affair. And I did it in such a way that I embarrassed my husband. He's a good guy and he didn't deserve this, but I got swept off my feet by some guy, and the other guy's long gone. I fell for something I shouldn't have fallen for, and he's a jerk and he's out of the picture. But the fact is that everyone at our kids' school knows about the affair. Everyone at the Little League field knows about the affair. Everyone at our place of worship knows about the affair. I humiliated my husband, and I feel so guilty about it. And it seems like the least thing I can do is to let him have his life and go. He can have the house, he can have the assets. Let him just go on with his life, and I'll start anew here. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to make my peace with God, because I think I really screwed up, you know, when I messed up my marriage, right? And you say, well, okay, you know what? Those are generous values. Those are do you have a plan? She goes, yeah, I have a plan, actually. That's okay. Well, what's your plan for you? And she says, well, I went online and I found this group called the Sisters of Mercy. It's Mother Teresa's group. I'm going to have just enough money set aside for me to get a plane ticket to Calcutta. And then I'm going to go serve the poorest of the poor and hope that, you know, if I do that for the rest of my life, God will forgive me and that I'll find inner peace. Right? Okay, so you hear that. Now let me ask what you're thinking. How many say, you know what? Those are her values. Sign her up. Write the agreement. Let's move it along here. Mediation should allow people to live their values. But some of us are a little paternalistic, or a lot. Some of us might say, well, geez, how long have you had this plan? She says, I just thought of it this morning. Oh, okay. All right. Have you talked to a spiritual advisor, you know, a clergy member, a rabbi or a minister, or someone who's been theologically trained? If you're trying to make peace with God, I mean, you're making giant decisions here, and you're trying to accomplish a goal. For you to do that in isolation feels like a heavy load. I just wonder if you would want a week or two to be able to be in conversation with spiritual advisors to help you do this in a way that you wouldn't regret. Because the last thing I would want you to do is to be in Calcutta and to be there for a month or a year or 5 years and say, you know what? I think I've done my penance. I think I've made my peace. I want to go back to LA. Thank you very much. And frankly, because of the way you left LA, you have no way to get back. So the fact is, maybe, you know, if you want to give all your money to your ex-husband, good for you. I don't care, right? But you know, you could just put it in a blind trust and just say, you know what, I'll take my share of the money, and a year from now, I'll decide what I want to do with it, or maybe 5 years from now. But that for right now, the way you're approaching it is so extreme. I'm concerned that this is a rash decision that you might regret later, and I want to slow you down so you can think it through and consult with others before you take a jump off the cliff here. How many of you think I've gone way too far? I see some people shaking their head. No. Okay, fair enough. But and that's what I want you to know. There's the person who says, you know what? Because by the way, what am I checking on now, folks? I'm not checking on whether it's free and willing. I'm asking about capacity. Is this person in their right mind? And the people who do divorce law know that people going through divorce are up and down. One day it's all my fault. The next day it's all my partner's fault. And it's a very complicated psychological journey. And if we happen to catch her at the mediation when she's willing to walk away from all her earthly goods, should we jump on that so we can cement the deal? Or should we make sure that this is something that has legs on it that she's not going to regret? Is that our job? And by the way, don't forget, right now I'm in the situation of looking at domestic relations. Many of you are saying, Peter, that's not my world. Okay, let me ask, what time do you end a mediation? When does this become agreement by attrition? You start a mediation at 10 o'clock in the morning, you have somebody in their 70s, a participant in their 70s. When are they just exhausted? And that they frankly are not making good decisions. And is it incumbent upon you as a mediator to walk in the room and see this person kind of in a daze and say, Mr. Smith, are you okay? Are you at the top of your game? Because you're making really big decisions now. Are you comfortable making significant decisions at this state of in your emotional and physical state? Are you too tired to do this? Is that our job to ask that question, or is it their job to say, Peter, do we have to finish this tonight? I'm exhausted. If they say, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, do we respect that and say, well, I don't want to keep the mediation going forward if I got a person who's just, desperate and exhausted. So there you are. It's kind of thinking about capacity in another. I mean, I've had friends who call me up and say, Pete, I just came from a mediation. It was a 70-year-old woman and her 50-year-old son. And the son says, Mom, if you don't sign, if you don't sign these papers giving me control over all the assets, I'm going to disappear and never see you again. And the mediator is watching the adult parent who's maybe in a vulnerable place, get emotionally bullied. And the question is, what do we do? Do we just sit back and say, you know what, you shouldn't have raised such a jerk, or do we use our office to say, okay, time out here, let's take a breather here and think about what we're doing. Okay, so
Peter,
by the way,
Peter, the capacity question seems to me to be a fundamentally different question than some of the others that you've been asking.
Great.
Because the acid test question that I ask myself is, well, if I say something in one room, how would the folks at the other end of the hall feel if they knew I was asking this or saying this? And that's the acid test that I ask myself about neutrality.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to capacity, it's in the interest of the person down the hall that the person to whom you're talking have the capacity to sign the contract, because that other fella down the hall doesn't want to open himself up to having the settlement agreement rescinded on grounds that the person who entered into it did not have the mental psychological capacity to enter into a contract. So that to me seems to be different in terms of neutrality than some of the other questions. And the other thing that I think needs to be addressed here is, when does the mediator cross the line and start practicing law, perhaps without a license and perhaps without disclosing that they've crossed the line from being a mediator to giving legal advice,
Great.
When indeed the mediator's convening documents or representations to the parties in one sense or another may well say, I am not functioning as a lawyer for either side.
Right. And I'm suggesting that if you take an activist approach to mediation, that maybe your convening documents need to be specific about, I'm going to be working for what I believe to be a fair process, which includes informed decision making and free and willing decisions. But by the way, notice I think all three of these, Jeff, you've helped me tremendously, because your comment says, Peter, time out here. because I think all three of these are aspects of legally enforceable agreements. Are we making a mistake? These are all contract defenses. And for us, many of us as lawyers, to say, you know, time out here, shouldn't we as lawyers be looking at the agreements that are coming out of our mediation and asking if they don't pass legal muster? And that's what Jeff was saying with regard to capacity, but he wasn't willing to take the bait on free and willing. And he also didn't like the idea of saying if someone's making a mistake, you know, that might be another reason why I might want to get involved.
Peter, I don't think you're talking about mistake in the sense of the legal cubbyhole for mistake. It's a very narrow ground. I think what you're talking about here is poor judgment, and that's a very subjective. That's a very subjective question. A mistake.
Well, and again, you know what? I'll leave it out there. You know, to me, ignorance could be again. I haven't done the legal research to see whether ignorance is a form of a mistake or not. But so as we, same idea though. Those of us who are lawyers, are you going to look at the agreements that are coming out of your thing and ask a quality control question? Does the agreement that I'm helping to generate here pass legal muster? By the way, hold on. I've got one more before we leave all this. I've got one more. What if she says, I say, so why are you doing this? Right? And she doesn't talk about getting beat up, and she doesn't talk about, you know, guilt and all that kind of stuff that may be part of the psychological journey. Instead, what she says, Peter, you know what? It appears to me you're worried about me. I go, I am. I'm seeing you give a very generous deal here, and I've asked if you have a plan for yourself, and you don't seem to have one. And he says, okay, I'm going to tell you, but you can't tell my husband. You say, okay, tell me what's going on. She says, I've got a physician who wants to marry me on Friday. The prenup guarantees me $1 million. I'm walking away for $200,000 or $300,000 of community assets from a middle-class family, but I'm stepping up in class. You know, all I got to do is get to Vegas by Friday, get married, and the prenup guarantees me $1 million. Just help me get out of this marriage quickly so I can get to Vegas, right? If she gives you that explanation, how many of you say, well, let's move that one right along? Most of the time, everyone says, yeah, sure. And the reason that I love that spectrum of questions is because if she gives an explanation that makes sense to me, makes financial, strategic sense to me, then I'm moving along. If she gives me an explanation that sounds cockamamie, I'm like going, time out here. What's this person doing? Are they thinking this through? And suddenly I'm slowing it down so that she doesn't make a rash decision. And suddenly I am projecting my values as to what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And for us to recognize that consciously or unconsciously, we might be either speeding up or slowing down, you know, the decision making as we work our way through all this. All right, let me ask you a question.
But Peter, I have a question for you first.
I don't, wait, hold on, not yet.
Okay.
Let me do this first. How thick is your mediation skin? So the fact is, few of us, I think, would say, you know what, they have to divide it exactly 50-50 for me to feel like this is all cool, right? I heard someone say leather. Okay, Yvonne, right? So the question is, you know, what's the range? You know, is it a 55-45? Anything within that range, you'll just kind of move it along, or is it a 70-30? Does there get to be some point to where their agreement is so far from what the law would do that you are going to scrutinize these things so significantly because you know why? Because we're back to the contract concept of unconscionable, that the agreement is so off base it's unconscionable and unconscionable. So now, if I'm going to be honest, let me tell you about me, okay? I look at the outcome. If I have the legal expertise, and I have to tell you, Those of you who know me well know I don't. My first job as a lawyer, I worked for the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. It's part of ERISA. It's the governmental agency that you have to deal with when you terminate your pension plan. It's like the FDIC insures banks, this agency. So the fact is, I have the most obscure legal expertise. And I wish that I had practiced personal injury law for 20 years or business litigation. I wish that I had, but the fact is I don't. So most of the time I'm not able to do this as much as I wish I could. But the fact is, as I understand the law as a statement of social values, right? I do. If people are doing what I think approximately what the law would have them do, then I don't worry about all this stuff because they happen to somehow stumble into an outcome that makes sense. But if I see the further they get away from what I think the law would have them do, the more I want to make sure that, you know what, that their lawyer knows what they're doing, that they're in their capacity, that they're free and willing, because it looks to me like the path you're going down is insane and unconscionable. Well, somebody's overreaching. Someone's getting an incredibly great deal. I gave this workshop to the Southern California Mediation Association at their annual conference years ago. And a person who is very reputable and dear friend kind of said, Peter, I want you to know, I do volunteer mediations down at the EEOC. I'm an employment lawyer. I see some cases to where I say, wow, if this person walked into my law office and I represented them, I think I would get them about $150,000 for if their story plays out. Right. I think the case is worth about 150. And then I mediate this thing and they settle for 5. And this mediator says, are you telling me that I shouldn't be doing that? And I said, you know what? We all have to live, we all have to figure out how we sleep at night. It's okay with me if you have different standards than me. But my question is, do we want mediation to be used as a means of taking advantage of people? And in the healthcare situation, we have a lot of healthcare organizations that are creating dispute resolution, in-house dispute resolution programs, and getting to people who have a legit claim and hopefully negotiating and getting a signed released before they can go see an attorney. And I got to tell you, that bothers the heck out of me. I think that seeing an attorney is excellent for people to know what their rights are. And then they can decide if they want their full legal rights or if they're willing to give a discount. So for us as a mediation field to ask, how is mediation being used? And is it sometimes being used to take advantage of people? And if so, how do we feel about that? So I'll let you know that in New York, I don't know if it's still true, but 10 years ago, New York, the employment section of the New York City Bar set up a program that said anyone who's going to go to the EEOC for mediation, they can have a 1-hour consultation with an employment lawyer before they go to the EEOC, and for them to be able to walk into that EEOC meeting with some sense of context as to whether what happened to them was legally actionable and the range of damages that usually accompany that what happened to them. And it's only a 1-hour consultation, but it's the legal community saying we don't want people to we don't want people to look back on mediation and say, you know, man, I went to that mediation and everybody seemed so nice and that was, you know, but at the end of the day, I got screwed and nobody cared, and no one did it. And frankly, I think that the mediator knew I was getting screwed. And let me put one more nail in the coffin. For those of you who are laissez-faire, okay, and you say, Peter, I just want to do neutrality. Please don't burden me with all this stuff, okay? It makes my head hurt, okay? I just want to make sure you know, in my opinion, the mediator is your last best hope. Because if we overlay on top of this chart, mediation confidentiality, the person who goes to mediation and gets taken advantage of for one reason or another, there's no judicial review. That you can't go to the court and say, Your Honor, you know, I went to mediation and everyone in the room knew what they were doing except for me and my lawyer, the relative or something. But you know, we got duped, right? And I want out of this agreement. And the judge is going to say, okay, you know, give me a proffer. You know, well, at the mediation, I object because whatever happens at the mediation stays in mediation. And now the confidentiality overlay on all of this means that if we take a laissez-faire approach and say, I can't be bothered by all this quality control stuff, now suddenly, now what happens to us? Okay, hold on. So this is so far, this is just Peter Robinson moralizing. All right, I got 5 minutes left. I'm going to end with this. I want to go to the model standards of conduct. Okay, and we're going to have 2 columns here. Neutrality and fairness. All right, the very first model is what? Self-determination. Self-determination, what do you think that would fit when it says a mediator shall conduct the mediation based on the principle of party self-determination? That would suggest that we should be neutral, doesn't it? And if you go to conferences and you get into some of these ethical conversations, people say self-determination, self-determination. You know what cracks me up? I don't think they ever read the next sentence, because the next sentence defines self-determination. Ready? Self-determination is the act of coming to a voluntary, so I do have some standards here, uncoerced decision in which each party makes a free and informed decision, free and informed choices as to process. Are you ready for it? And outcome. Are you kidding me? That's what self-determination means. All these people will say self-determination, self-determination. That we have a duty, you shall mediate with self-determination. We have a duty to make sure these things are all present. And that means that if someone's making an ignorant decision and they don't know their rights, we should do something about it. But just to be clear here, it says down in here, it says a mediator cannot personally ensure that each party has made free and informed choices to reach particular decisions. But where appropriate, a mediator should make parties aware of the importance of consulting other professionals to help them make informed choices, right? So it does go back and say that this whole idea of informed choices, the mediator cannot necessarily do that, but it does say that if it's not present, you should shut it down, folks. A mediator shall conduct a mediation based on the principle of party self-determination. If these things are not present, tell them, you really need to see a lawyer, or your lawyer needs to go see a lawyer. The fact is, if people are making decisions in ignorance, then the ethics here kind of mirror, some of my list, don't they? So on that point, we got 1 minute left. I always give the last minute to Jeff.
Peter, thank you so much. This is fantastic. The next time we have you back, let's follow up, because the questions that flow from this are profound in terms of mediators crossing the line into the practice of law and the terrible risks that mediators run when dealing with unrepresented parties. Divorces are a good situation of that, where emotions are high and sometimes quite volatile. And there are questions about what you do when you sense that a lawyer is not in there to protect their client from making some decisions which they might regret. There are all sorts of ethical issues that arise, I think, particularly in the family domain, in terms of mediators crossing the line and practicing law, either without a license, if they're not lawyers, or doing so in an unethical way, if they are lawyers, by representing both sides to the same dispute.
Jeff?
Hopefully, someday, some state bar, someplace will take a serious look at this, and it'll be quite interesting to see what happens. Peter, I gotta say, we want people to support food banks. That's the whole purpose of this. Natalie has, and we got over 100 people here who are eating this up. So since you're eating it up, help other people's eat too. Contribute to the Union Rescue Mission or the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank, please, in Peter's honor. This is a knockout presentation, Peter. Thank you.
or the food bank in your community. It doesn't have to be an LA base. You find something in your community, just know that. And Jeff, I want you to lead that workshop on when we're crossing the line.
We'll do it. We'll do it together, Peter, because I love to collaborate with you. It's fantastic. Everybody, Peter, thank you so much. You are a superstar.
It's always
Natalie, Jean, thank you so much. To our generous audience, thank you all so much. And with that, dear friends, we are complete.